When I was in 8th grade, I used to really dislike my learning difference, and I didn't love talking about it, and I didn't want anybody to know I had it, because I'll be honest, I was pretty ashamed of it, and I didn't want to be singled out as different or anything. So I didn't talk to my teachers about it, and I kind of just went through life ignoring the problem, which just made it worse, and I didn't do very well on any of my tests because I didn't get any accommodations. And when I left my old school and I came to Lick, I started asking for accommodations because I had realized that they actually did help, and I began to do way better on tests because I found that I actually needed the help, and it was just leveling the playing field. It wasn't like giving me an extra boost up.
So basically, starting in kindergarten, I was always disruptive in class, could never pay attention, was always talking to my friends, and just had a ton of different things going on in my mind at one time. And I was always called over by the teachers. I got in trouble a lot, and it was really hard for me for sure because it kind of alienated me from other kids, although there were some other kids that also had kind of emerging learning differences and behavioral differences when they were that age. But I just remember like really loving school and loving the material, and wanting to show my teachers that I did, but just having kind of this like hyperactive part of me kind of getting in the way of that. And then as I got older, it continued to persist. Obviously I matured, but there was still definitely that distracting component that just really got in the way of my work, would make me procrastinate a lot, and just like I really drifted off a lot in class. And that was when I was diagnosed in 7th or 8th grade, and I had combined form ADHD, and yeah, so the hyperactive component was still there, but what I've realized is that over the past 4 years, the hyperactive component has gone away, although I still get distracted all the time. But honestly, I think that, learning about myself and taking the tests has been super great, and I actually was just reevaluated, and once you're 18, they tell you what's in your evaluation, and I was told my IQ, I was told where I was strong and where I was weaker, and it was honestly a really great experience, and the way that the information was delivered to me was not demeaning. It was super informative, and yeah, I would say kind of one of the hardest parts about having a learning difference and having accommodations is that sometimes kids will be quick to assume that it gives other kids an unfair advantage, or that, oh, you're so lucky that you get extra time, but it really is just leveling the playing field and making it equal for everybody. And yeah, I think that's something that everyone should know.
Okay, until pretty recently, I thought of myself as somebody who wasn't personally affected by this. Yeah, a couple years ago, my daughter was diagnosed with Tourette's, and last year when we took her in for a meeting, the neurologist said, it's inherited, and in most cases, like, this is an inherited thing. And then like all kinds of like things went off in my brain. So and I called my mom, and I realized, yeah, I probably had Tourette's. So yeah, so my perception has changed because it's a lot more personal. Yeah, and what I've learned is that one of the things that a lot of Tourette's people have is like a real tactile sense. And it's like, oh, like I always have something in my hand. If you think of me like sophomore year, when I always have a pen or something and I touch everything, it's like, oh, that's why I do that. So yeah, so I think I have been sometimes like more casual about it than I should have been for other people. So I'm kind of rethinking that a little bit now. So that's an honest answer.
I would say my perception of neurodiversity has changed a lot over time. And I was diagnosed relatively young. Like I was in 6th grade when I was diagnosed, and I always kind of knew that I had a weird relationship with math, and that I definitely struggled with it more than like my classmates did. But I guess I was kind of like, I always kind of attributed that to just me not being good at math. And so I was just like, you know what, that's fine, that's good. I don't have to be good at math. You know, that's what it's gonna be. And I think when I actually got like the diagnosis, that kind of like justified to me that it wasn't that I was bad at math, that my brain just worked differently than everyone else's in figuring out math. And so I've had to definitely overcome a lot of things in terms of, you know, confronting my own belief that like I was stupid because I didn't understand math. But otherwise, like I think it's been pretty consistent since then. Like I understand that like sometimes people's brains are different, and it doesn't have anything to do with someone's intelligence or if they can do something or not. It just, you have to teach people different ways, and people learn things different ways. So I feel like that's definitely the way my opinion or my perception of the learning difference has shifted over time.
I mean, I think like growing up, I thought of ADHD and other learning differences in the same way I thought of like being gluten-free, right? Like it's not that it's not a real thing, and it's a real thing that really does affect some people, and then it's also like weirdly trendy in certain circles that visit Whole Foods a lot, right? So that's definitely how I thought of ADHD. And then I had an assessment for freshman year and was diagnosed with ADHD, and was like, that's going to change my self-image and how I think about this a bit. And I think that over the years, especially because Ms. Montgomery is so good at finding the right ways to explain how my mind is working, that it's become much more of just, yeah, this is the label we've given how my brain works to make it easier to describe and easier to categorize for when we need to categorize things. But this is really just a way of describing some of the things that make me me.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start off by saying I was one of those unfortunate people who was not diagnosed early on. I didn't get diagnosed until this year with autism, high functioning, but it took 27 years of my life of not understanding why I did things the way that I did. And when I was a kid, like starting when I was like 2 and 3 years old, my family and my friends and really everyone in my life would make comments that they thought I was lazy, or anytime I would have muscle spasms or any sort of fidgeting, they would call me spastic. Really, like words that they didn't think would hurt that much, and things that I attributed to myself throughout my life, thinking that those were actual words that meant what I was doing. I was spastic, I was lazy, and I had those labels on myself up until I was watching a video of someone who had been recently diagnosed with autism as an adult. And I was hearing her story and realizing that maybe I should be evaluated. So yeah, I finally got into a place. I can't recall what their name is, but they specialize in evaluating adults who may have been misdiagnosed or just simply not evaluated as children. And it's brought a lot of meaning to who I am as a person, and I'm finally on the road to accepting that I'm not lazy. It just takes me a little more time to initiate things. I'm not uninterested in conversations with people. I have a hard time finding words and connecting. And I'm not spastic. I just have, there are things that my body does that I can't control. And it's been an interesting journey the last year, and it's starting a lot of the healing from a lot of the misperceptions, as it says on the board, that I faced. But yeah, it's also been really interesting seeing new things that I'd never noticed before crop up, like why I have to watch my feet when I walk. It's not that I stare at the floor, it's that I have to put myself in a place where I have to know where my body is at all times. And why I tend to hide behind things. I tend to hide behind cameras and computer screens, and I'm in the back of the crowd. So this is really strange for me to be in front of a camera, but I decided that it's time for me to really come to terms with the truth of my neurodiversity. Yeah.
In freshman year, I broke my finger, and I had I was going through therapy and things like that, but I broke it, and I had to get surgery for it, and because of that, I had to wear this like cast around it, and I couldn't write since I write with my right hand, and I had to come here and ask for accommodations for some quizzes and tests so that somebody could write for me, because I myself couldn't, and it was embarrassing at first, but I realized that it was okay to ask for help, and it made me much more comfortable asking for help in other classes. In general, I feel like because of that experience and the fact that the LSE was gladly helped me, I feel like I was able to socialize more and feel more comfortable amongst my peers, whereas in the beginning I didn't. I felt really uncomfortable and I didn't know how to, be myself. So through that experience, I learned how to be myself with others and feel comfortable asking for help.
I think my perception of my own neurodiversity has changed as I've gotten older, where I didn't realize I had some things that I could have done to help myself when I was younger. Like my biggest issue is I can't understand the whole unless I understand every little part. And I thought that was just something that didn't signify anything. But as I've learned through talking to Miss Montgomery, that it actually is just a kind of a processing problem that I have, or maybe not a problem, but I physically can't understand little bits of something until I understand the whole thing. And it's like these small things stay in my brain. I understand them, but they don't come to the surface until I understand the whole thing, and that can be challenging, especially if I'm taking classes even just for pleasure, taking classes as an adult. Sometimes I kind of sit back through most of the class and I can't really participate because I don't want to sound like I don't want to pretend to understand something that I don't. And then usually toward the end of any class I take, everything kind of fits together and I'm like, oh, now I get it. But it often takes me a lot longer to process everything than other students. However, I don't really think this is any kind of disability, because I feel as if I try to understand things in more depth than other people. So when I finally come to the surface with my understanding, it's a lot stronger than other people that were just skirting along through the whole class. And I guess some of my misperceptions about neurodiversity is I didn't realize the whole spectrum of things that could possibly be on like a neurodiverse spectrum. I was just knew about the standard stuff like dyslexia and things like that. And it's really refreshing to see Miss Montgomery kind of break down the little things also that can be present in different students. There can be like, these students might have 2 of the same issues, but then they have 4 other issues that are not similar to each other, and I didn't really think about how those things can overlap. So I think it's really important that we address individual students and not just lump them into one category.
I was diagnosed in 4th grade with dyslexia, and they I don't know if they did this to comfort me or my parents or something, but they more or less named people that have been very successful with either the things that they've done or things like people like Leonardo da Vinci. and stuff, where like they've done like amazing things, and it's not necessarily despite being dyslexic or having learning difference, but more like maybe because they had one. So like I guess the way that I've always looked at it has been more of like maybe like there's some things I'm not that great at, like reading quickly. I don't do that, but like there's other things that I can do like really well, like coding, or like coming up with like cool designs in Rhino or something like that, where like it just like works out better for my brain. And so it sort of like has guided me through like my interests, but I've also just like gotten interested in things I'm good at. So yeah. Okay, so I mentioned reading quickly before. My solve for that was to get an app that lets me that like reads it out loud to me. And it can go up to like 400 words a minute, which is a bit too fast for me, but like if I don't have to actually annotate, I can do like 350. So that's like way faster than I can actually read, and I can get the information to my brain way faster that way. So that's, I overcame it. But yeah.
That's great.
I used to have a very bad connotation of neurodiversity because I feel that I was kind of raised in an environment where that thing was looked down upon. But I think when my brother started taking pills for his depression, that really showed me that like it deeply affected even people around me, and that it wasn't something that was always clear and easily distinguishable, and it wasn't necessarily something that was bad. I've had a lot of friends also approach me about how they have these accommodations, and when I speak to them about those accommodations, it's really nice to know that like it's really useful in understanding how it's not that, oh, they get extra time like as an advantage, but rather how the system has kind of always had them at a disadvantage. I feel that I still have probably a lot of misconceptions about neurodiversity because I don't really know a lot about it. I wish I did, which is why neurodiversity fair is good. And then, and I feel that it might be a journey that I have to go and overcome over the years. The end.